Marcus Johnson walked through the iron gates of Westbrook Music Academy with his worn keyboard case clutched tightly in his hands. The prestigious institution stood before him like a castle made of red brick and glass, its towers reaching toward the gray autumn sky. Students in expensive coats hurried past him, their designer bags swinging from their shoulders as they chatted about their summer trips to Europe and private lessons with famous musicians. Marcus adjusted his second-hand jacket and kept his eyes forward, trying not to feel out of place. He had worked 3 jobs over the past 2 years to save enough money for the entrance exam fee. Every evening after school, he cleaned tables at a diner, delivered newspapers before dawn, and spent weekends helping his neighbor repair cars. His mother had cried when he told her he wanted to audition for Westbrook. She knew how much music meant to him, but she also knew the world they lived in. A young black boy from the south side of the city rarely got chances like this, but Marcus was determined. Music was not just a hobby for him. It was the language his soul spoke when words failed him. The audition hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the walls were decorated with portraits of famous composers and musicians who had graduated from the academy. Marcus counted only 2 faces that looked like his among the dozens of portraits. He took a deep breath and found a seat in the waiting area. Around him, other candidates practiced on their instruments, their fingers moving with the confidence that came from years of expensive training. A girl with perfect posture played violin scales that sounded like water flowing over smooth stones. A boy in a tailored suit ran through complex piano passages without looking at the sheet music. Marcus pulled out his battered notebook where he had written his original composition. The pages were wrinkled and stained with coffee marks from late nights at the diner. He had titled the piece Mama's Hands because he wrote it thinking about his mother's fingers, worn rough from years of cleaning other people's houses, yet still gentle enough to braid his sister's hair every morning. The melody had come to him one night when he heard her humming while washing dishes, a sound so full of hope despite their struggles. A sharp voice cut through his thoughts. Number 47, Marcus Johnson. A woman with silver hair and a clipboard stood at the door, her expression neutral. Marcus stood up, his legs suddenly feeling weak. He followed her down a long corridor lined with practice rooms where he could hear scales and arpeggios being played at lightning speed. They stopped at a large wooden door with a brass handle. Inside the audition room, 3 judges sat behind a long table. In the center was Principal Whitmore, a man whose reputation preceded him throughout the music world. He had trained at the finest conservatories in Vienna and had turned Westbrook into one of the most elite music schools in the country. His white hair was slicked back perfectly, and his suit probably cost more than Marcus's mother made in 3 months. On his left sat Professor Chen, a pianist known for her technical precision. On his right was Dr. Anderson, a composer who had written symphonies performed by major orchestras. Marcus walked to the grand piano that sat in the center of the room like a black giant. He had never played on an instrument this beautiful. The piano at his community center had missing keys and pedals that stuck. This instrument gleamed under the lights, its surface so polished he could see his reflection in it. Principal Whitmore looked down at his papers. Marcus Johnson, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. It says here you have no formal training, no private lessons, no summer intensives. You learned piano at a community center. He looked up, his eyebrows raised slightly. And you believe you belong at Westbrook Academy? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt the eyes of all 3 judges on him. He could hear the doubt in the principal's tone, the unspoken words that said someone like him did not belong in a place like this. His hands trembled slightly as he placed his notebook on the piano's music stand. I believe music belongs to everyone, sir, Marcus said quietly, but firmly, and I have worked very hard to be here today. Principal Whitmore leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It was not a kind smile. Music may belong to everyone, young man, but Westbrook Academy does not. This institution has standards. We have a tradition of excellence that spans over 100 years. Our students come from the finest preparatory programs in the world. He gestured vaguely at Marcus's worn clothes and second-hand shoes. You must understand that what you learned at your little community center cannot compare to the rigorous training our applicants receive. Professor, Chen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Dr. Anderson looked down at his notes, his jaw tight. But Principal Whitmore continued, his voice growing sharper. I have seen dozens of students from disadvantaged backgrounds audition here over the years. They come with hope and dreams, but music at this level requires more than passion. It requires resources, opportunity, and frankly, a certain pedigree. I do not say this to be cruel, but to save you from disappointment. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. Every doubt he had ever pushed away came flooding back. Every time someone had told him to be realistic, to choose a practical career, to stop dreaming about things that were not meant for people like him. He thought about leaving, about walking out of this room with whatever dignity he had left. But then he thought about his mother's hands, rough and beautiful. He thought about every morning he woke up at 4 to deliver papers in the freezing cold. He thought about the music that lived inside him, demanding to be heard. He placed his fingers on the keys. May I play, sir? He asked. Principal Whitmore waved his hand dismissively. Go ahead, but make it quick. We have many other candidates to hear today, and I am afraid you are already taking up valuable time. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. He blocked out the principal's words, the expensive room, the judges staring at him with skepticism. He thought only of the music. His fingers touched the keys, and the first notes of Mama's hands filled the audition hall. The melody started soft and gentle like a lullaby, then grew stronger and more complex, weaving together threads of struggle and hope, pain and joy, exhaustion and love. The music poured out of Marcus like water from a broken dam. His fingers moved across the keys with a confidence that surprised even him. Every emotion he had bottled up over the years found expression in the notes. The melody twisted and turned, moving from minor to major keys, from slow contemplative passages to bursts of energetic rhythm that made the piano sing. He forgot about Principal Whitmore's cutting words. He forgot about the expensive chandelier above him and the portraits of famous musicians on the walls. There was only the music and the story it told. The piece moved through different movements, each representing a chapter of his life. The opening section was his childhood, when music first found him through the old radio in their apartment. His mother would turn it on while cooking dinner, and young Marcus would stand on a chair to reach the counter, moving his small fingers as if playing invisible keys. The middle section grew darker, representing the hard times when his father left and money became even tighter. His mother took on extra shifts, and Marcus would see her come home with her shoulders sagging. Yet she always found energy to smile at him and his sister. Then the composition shifted again, and sunlight seemed to break through clouds. This was the moment when Mrs. Patterson, the volunteer at the community center, noticed him watching through the window as she taught piano lessons. She had invited him inside, given him his first real lesson, and never charged his family a single dollar. She saw something in him that others missed. She told him that talent was not about where you came from, but what you carried inside your heart. Marcus's hands flew across the keys now, building toward the climax of the piece. He incorporated elements of jazz that he had learned from listening to records at the public library, mixed with classical techniques he had taught himself from old textbooks. The music became a conversation between different styles, different worlds, different possibilities. It spoke of bridges being built between communities that rarely touched. It sang about dreams that refused to die even when the world said they should. The final section slowed down, becoming gentle again. It was a return to the beginning, but transformed by the journey. The same lullaby melody from the opening came back, but now it was richer, layered with harmonies that showed growth and understanding. Marcus played the last notes with such tenderness that the room seemed to hold its breath. When his fingers lifted from the keys, silence filled the space like water in a glass. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Marcus kept his eyes on the piano keys, afraid to look up and see disappointment or mockery on the judges' faces. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands trembled slightly as they rested on his lap. He had poured everything he had into that performance, and now he felt empty, vulnerable, exposed. Then Professor Chen cleared her throat softly. When Marcus finally dared to glance up, he saw that her eyes were glistening with tears. She was not crying, but she was close. Her hands were pressed together in front of her lips as if she was praying or trying to hold back words. Dr. Anderson sat very still, his expression unreadable, but his pen had stopped moving on his notepad. He stared at Marcus with an intensity that made the boy shift nervously on the piano bench. Principal Whitmore's face had changed completely. The smug confidence had vanished, replaced by something Marcus could not quite identify. Was it shock? Confusion? Perhaps even a touch of shame? The principal's mouth opened slightly as if he wanted to speak but could not find the words. His fingers drummed once on the table, then stopped. The silence stretched on, becoming uncomfortable. Finally, Professor Chen spoke. "That was extraordinary," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "In 20 years of judging auditions, I have never heard an original composition played with such raw honesty and technical skill. The way you blended different musical traditions, the emotional narrative, the control of dynamics." She trailed off, shaking her head in amazement. "Where did you learn to compose like that?" Marcus swallowed hard. "I just wrote what I felt, ma'am. Mrs. Patterson at the community center taught me basic theory and harmony. The rest I learned from books and by listening. I spend hours at the library listening to recordings of Chopin, Monk, Ellington, Beethoven, anyone who speaks through music." Dr. Anderson leaned forward. "You taught yourself counterpoint? Harmonic progression? By listening and reading?" His voice carried disbelief but also respect. "Young man, students with private tutors and years of conservatory preparation struggle with those concepts. Yet you navigated them naturally, instinctively even." Principal Whitmore finally found his voice, though it was much quieter than before. "The technical execution was impressive," he admitted slowly, as if each word cost him something. "Your touch, your phrasing, the way you shaped the melodic lines." He paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. "I must confess I did not expect this level of musicianship." Marcus did not know what to say. Part of him wanted to feel vindicated, to throw the principal's earlier words back in his face, but another part of him simply felt tired. He had spent so much energy proving himself, fighting against assumptions and low expectations, that he sometimes wondered if he would ever reach a place where his music could speak for itself, without him having to battle for the right to be heard. "May I ask?" Professor Chen said gently. "What inspired this piece?" It felt deeply personal. Marcus looked down at his hands, those same hands that had just created something beautiful. "It is called Mama's hands," he said quietly. "My mother works as a cleaning lady. She works hard every day, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs. Her hands are rough and scarred from years of labor, but they are also the hands that braided my sister's hair, that held me when I was scared, that somehow found a way to put food on our table even when there was no money." His voice grew stronger. She never complained. She just kept working, kept hoping, kept believing that her children could have better lives. This piece is about her strength, her sacrifice, her love. The room fell silent again. Professor Chen pressed her fingers to her eyes briefly. Dr. Anderson nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Even Principal Whitmore seemed moved, though he tried to hide it behind a mask of professional composure. "I apologize," Principal Whitmore said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise even himself. "My comments before you played were inappropriate and presumptuous. I made judgments based on circumstances rather than ability." He straightened his papers with unnecessary force. "It is a mistake I have made before, and one I clearly need to continue working to correct." Marcus did not expect an apology from the principal, and he was not sure how genuine it was. But it was something. "Thank you, sir," he said simply. Professor Chen made some notes on her evaluation form. "Marcus, regardless of the audition outcome, you have a rare gift. Music is not just something you do. It is who you are. That authenticity cannot be taught." She smiled at him warmly. "Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Marcus gathered his notebook and stood up from the piano bench. His legs felt shaky, and he realized he had been holding tension in his body the entire time. As he walked toward the door, he glanced back one more time at the beautiful grand piano, wondering if he would ever sit at an instrument like that again. The 2 weeks following the audition felt like the longest of Marcus's life. He went back to his routine of school, work, and practice, but his mind kept drifting to that moment in the audition hall. Sometimes he replayed Principal Whitmore's harsh words in his head, feeling the sting all over again. Other times he remembered Professor Chen's tears and Dr. Anderson's amazed expression, and those memories gave him a small flame of hope that refused to die. His mother noticed his distraction. One evening, as he washed dishes after their simple dinner of rice and beans, she came up behind him and placed her rough hands on his shoulders. "Whatever happens with that school," she said softly, You are already a musician. Nobody can take that from you. Not with their judgments or their fancy buildings or their expensive opinions. Marcus turned to face her. In the dim kitchen light, he could see how tired she looked. New lines had appeared around her eyes, and her shoulders curved forward from years of bending and scrubbing. Yet her smile was bright and full of pride. "I know, Mama," he said. But it would open doors. Real teachers, better instruments, opportunities to perform. It could change everything. She cupped his face in her hands. "Baby, you have already changed everything. You took the pain and struggle of our lives and turned it into beauty. That takes more courage than most people have." She kissed his forehead. "But yes, I hope they see what I see. I hope they give you that chance." At school, Marcus tried to focus on his regular classes, but it was difficult. His guidance counselor, Mr. Roberts, called him into the office one afternoon. "I heard you auditioned at Westbrook," he said, shuffling papers on his cluttered desk. "That is quite ambitious." There was something in his tone that made Marcus tense, a familiar doubt wrapped in polite words. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied carefully. Mr. Roberts leaned back in his chair. "Look, Marcus, you are a good student. Solid grades, no discipline problems. But Westbrook Academy is extremely competitive. Even their rejected applicants are exceptional." He pulled out a brochure for the local community college. "Have you thought about more realistic options? There is a perfectly good music program at City Community College. You could study there while working, maybe transfer somewhere later." Marcus took the brochure without looking at it. He had heard versions of this speech his entire life. "Be realistic. Do not aim too high. Know your place." People said these things with kind faces and caring voices, which somehow made it worse. They genuinely believed they were helping him avoid disappointment. But they never considered that their low expectations hurt more than any failure could. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Roberts," Marcus said quietly, "but I'm going to wait and see what Westbrook decides." The counselor sighed. "Suit yourself. I just do not want to see you get your hopes up for nothing." After school, Marcus headed to his shift at the diner. The owner, Mr. Chen, was Professor Chen's uncle, though Marcus did not know this yet. Mr. Chen was a kind man who always saved the day-old bread for Marcus to take home to his family. As Marcus wiped down tables, he listened to the conversations around him. Business people talked about deals and profits. College students complained about their workload. A group of music students from the university laughed about their upcoming recital. Marcus felt caught between worlds. He was not part of the wealthy community that could afford places like Westbrook, but he also was not satisfied staying in the narrow boundaries others drew around his life. Music had shown him there was a bigger world out there, one where passion and skill mattered more than your address or the brand of shoes you wore. He just needed someone to give him a chance to prove it. On Friday afternoon, 2 weeks and 3 days after his audition, Marcus came home from his newspaper delivery route to find his mother sitting at their small kitchen table with an envelope in her hands. Her face was unreadable. His sister Jasmine bounced excitedly in her chair. "It came! The letter from the fancy school came!" Marcus's heart jumped into his throat. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, fear paralyzed him. What if they had rejected him? What if Principal Whitmore's apology was just politeness before they told him he was not good enough? The envelope sat on the table like a small bomb, capable of destroying dreams with a few typed sentences. "Open it," his mother said gently, pushing the envelope toward him. Marcus sat down slowly. His hands shook as he picked up the envelope. It was thick, made of expensive cream-colored paper with the Westbrook Academy seal embossed in gold. He had heard that thick envelopes were good news. Thin ones meant rejection, but he was afraid to hope. He carefully tore open the seal and pulled out the papers inside. The first thing he saw was a letter on official letterhead. His eyes scanned the opening paragraph once, then twice, unable to fully process the words. "Dear Mr. Johnson, it is with great pleasure that we inform you of your acceptance to Westbrook Music Academy. Your audition demonstrated exceptional musicality and artistic vision. The admissions committee was unanimous in their decision." Marcus stopped reading. His vision blurred. His sister shrieked with joy and jumped around the kitchen. His mother covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "Oh, baby, you did it." But Marcus kept reading, his excitement slowly giving way to crushing disappointment. The letter continued with details about tuition, Fees, required materials, and housing costs. The numbers swam before his eyes. $45,000 per year for tuition alone, another $15,000 for room and board, books, instrument fees, concert attire, and miscellaneous expenses added up to several thousand more. Even with the partial merit scholarship they offered covering $15,000 annually, the remaining cost was impossible. He would need $45,000 just for the first year. His mother made $28,000 in a good year, and most of that went to rent, food, and keeping the lights on. They had no savings, no wealthy relatives to ask for help, no trust fund or college account. The acceptance letter that should have been the happiest moment of his life felt like a cruel joke. "What is wrong?" his mother asked, seeing his face change. "Is it not good news?" Marcus handed her the letter silently. He watched as she read through it, saw her expression move from joy to confusion to heartbreak. She set the letter down carefully as if it might shatter. "The money," she said quietly. "Of course. I should have thought about that." Jasmine stopped bouncing. "Does this mean Marcus cannot go?" Their mother pulled both children close. "We will figure something out," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "There are loans, payment plans, maybe more scholarships." She held Marcus tighter. "You earned this spot. We will find a way." But Marcus knew the reality. He had researched student loans and seen the crushing debt that followed people for decades. He had looked into work-study programs, but Westbrook's demanding schedule made outside employment nearly impossible. The door that had cracked open was already closing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. That night, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling where cracks formed patterns like rivers on a map. Through the thin walls, he could hear his mother crying softly in her room. The sound broke his heart more than his own disappointment. She had sacrificed so much, worked so hard also her children might have chances she never had. And now, even when he did everything right, even when he proved himself worthy, it still was not enough. He got up and went to the small keyboard in the corner of the living room, the one Mrs. Patterson had given him when the community center got a new one. He put on headphones so he would not wake anyone and began to play. His fingers moved across the keys, creating a melody that matched his mood. It was angry and sad, frustrated and resigned. Music was the only way he knew to process the unfairness of a world that demanded you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but never gave you boots to begin with. Monday morning arrived with gray skies that matched Marcus's mood. He went through the motions of getting ready for school, eating a quick breakfast of toast and instant coffee while his mother prepared for her early shift. She kissed his cheek before leaving, whispering encouragement that felt hollow against the weight of their financial reality. Jasmine chattered about her upcoming school play, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air like thick fog. At school, word had spread about his acceptance to Westbrook. Students he barely knew congratulated him in the hallways. Teachers smiled at him with pride. Mr. Roberts even pulled him aside to apologize for being discouraging, claiming he always knew Marcus had potential. But every congratulation felt like a knife twist because Marcus knew he would have to decline the offer. Acceptance without the ability to attend was almost worse than rejection. During lunch, he sat alone in the music room, seeking solace at the old upright piano. His fingers found the keys automatically, playing without conscious thought. The music that emerged was melancholic, a funeral march for dreams deferred. He was so absorbed in playing that he did not hear the door open or notice someone enter until a voice spoke behind him. "That is beautiful, but terribly sad. What happened to the hope I heard in your audition piece?" Marcus spun around to find Professor Chen standing in the doorway. She wore an elegant navy coat and carried a leather briefcase. Her kind eyes studied him with concern. "Professor Chen? What are you doing here?" She walked closer, her heels clicking on the worn linoleum floor. "I came to talk to you. When you did not respond to our acceptance letter, I grew worried." She sat on the bench beside him. "Your mother mentioned you received it. So why the silence?" Marcus looked down at the yellowed piano keys. "I cannot afford it," he said simply. The words hurt to speak out loud. "Even with the scholarship, the cost is impossible. My family cannot take on that kind of debt. It would not be fair to them." Professor Chen nodded slowly. "I suspected money might be the obstacle." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Marcus, after your audition, something unprecedented happened. The 3 judges rarely agree on anything, But we all recognize something special in you. Your performance stayed with me for days. I kept thinking about your composition, your story, your mother's hands. She opened the folder, revealing documents and photographs. I spoke with my uncle, Mr. Chen, who owns the diner where you work. He told me about your character, your work ethic, how you never complained despite juggling multiple jobs. I also contacted Mrs. Patterson at the community center. She spoke glowingly about your dedication and natural talent. Marcus listened, confused about where this was leading. Professor Chen continued, I then did something I have never done in my 20 years at Westbrook. I brought your audition recording to several board members and influential donors. I played your composition at a fundraising event. I told them your story, not to gain sympathy but to illustrate what we risk losing when we make education accessible only to the wealthy. She pulled out a letter with the Westbrook seal. The response was overwhelming. One board member, Mrs. Elizabeth Hartley, was so moved that she established a new scholarship in her late son's name. He was a talented musician who died in an accident before he could pursue his dreams. She wants to help students like you who have the passion and skill but lack financial resources. Marcus's heart began to pound. He was afraid to hope, afraid to believe what he was hearing. Professor Chen smiled at him warmly. Marcus, I am pleased to offer you the Hartley Legacy Scholarship. It will cover your full tuition, room and board, books, and provide a modest stipend for personal expenses. You will need to maintain good academic standing and contribute to the school community. But those are requirements I suspect you will exceed. The words did not feel real. Marcus stared at the letter, his eyes scanning the numbers that showed 0 remaining balance. Full scholarship? He whispered. Everything? Everything, Professor Chen confirmed. Mrs. Hartley wants to meet you personally. She believes her son would have loved your composition. She said it reminded her that music is not about perfection or prestige, but about truth and connection. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, and he did not try to hide them. I do not know what to say. This is beyond anything I imagined. Professor Chen placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Say yes. Say you will come to Westbrook and share your gift with the world. Say you will work hard not just for yourself, but for every student who comes after you who might face similar barriers. Her voice grew passionate. Your audition changed something at our institution, Marcus. Principal Whitmore has been humbled. He realized that his prejudices nearly caused us to reject one of the most talented applicants we have ever received. He is now pushing for more outreach to underserved communities and blind audition processes. Marcus wiped his eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. When my mother gets home tonight, can you be there? I want her to hear this from you. She needs to know that her sacrifices were not in vain. Professor Chen's eyes grew misty. I would be honored. That evening, when his mother trudged through the door after a 10-hour shift, exhausted and worn, she found Marcus sitting at the kitchen table with Professor Chen and Jasmine. The table was set with their best dishes, and Marcus had used his last paycheck to buy ingredients for a special dinner. His mother's face showed alarm at first, assuming bad news, but Marcus stood and pulled out a chair for her. Mama, sit down. Professor Chen has something to tell you. As Professor Chen explained the scholarship, Marcus watched his mother's face transform. Disbelief gave way to shock, shock melted into joy, and joy dissolved into tears. She pressed her scarred hands to her face and sobbed, her shoulders shaking. Thank you, she kept repeating. Thank you, thank you. Professor Chen took his mother's hands in hers. Do not thank me. Thank your son for his extraordinary talent and for refusing to let circumstances define his limits. Thank yourself for raising a young man with such strength and grace. She smiled. And thank your hands, which inspired one of the most moving pieces of music I have ever heard. Later that night, after Professor Chen left and Jasmine went to bed, Marcus and his mother sat together on their worn couch. She held him close like she did when he was a small child afraid of thunderstorms. I always knew you were special, she whispered. Even when you were tiny, banging on pots and pans like they were drums, I knew you heard the world differently. I was so scared, Marcus admitted. When I got that acceptance letter and saw the costs, I thought I would have to give up. I thought maybe people like me were not meant for places like Westbrook. His mother pulled back to look him in the eye. Listen to me carefully. You belong anywhere your talent and hard work can take you. The world will try to make you feel small, try to convince you to accept less than you deserve. But you have something precious inside you that nobody can diminish unless you let them. She tapped his chest over his heart. This music you make comes from struggle and love and truth. That is more valuable than anything money can buy. Marcus hugged her tighter. I am going to make you proud, Mama. I am going to study hard and become the best musician I can be. And someday when I make it, you will never have to clean another house or work double shifts again. She laughed softly. Oh, baby, you have already made me proud. Everything else is just extra. She kissed his forehead. Now go get some sleep. You have a big future ahead of you, and it starts with being well rested. That night, Marcus lay in bed feeling like he was floating. The acceptance letter was pinned to his wall now, a tangible reminder that dreams could come true even when circumstances suggested otherwise. He thought about the journey ahead, the challenges he would face at Westbrook, the work required to succeed among students who had advantages he never had. But for the first time in his life, he felt truly ready, not because he was fearless, but because he had already overcome so much that he knew he could handle whatever came next. The first day at Westbrook Music Academy arrived with warm September sunshine that seemed to bless new beginnings. Marcus stood at the entrance with 2 battered suitcases containing everything he owned. His mother and Jasmine had come to see him off, and his mother kept adjusting his collar and smoothing his shirt even though it was already perfect. Her eyes were red from crying all morning, but she wore a brave smile. Remember what I taught you, she said for the 10th time. Be respectful, but never let anyone make you feel inferior. Work hard, but also make friends. And call me every Sunday, you hear? Jasmine threw her arms around his waist. I am going to miss you so much. Who will help me with my math homework? Marcus knelt down to her level. You are smarter than you think, Jazz. You do not need me for math. But I will call you too, okay? And I will come home for Thanksgiving. Saying goodbye was harder than he expected. As his family drove away in their old car, Marcus felt both excited and terrified. He picked up his suitcases and walked through those iron gates that had intimidated him during his audition. This time he belonged here. He had earned his place. The dormitory was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. His roommate, a boy named Trevor from Connecticut, had arrived earlier with his parents and what seemed like a moving truck full of belongings. Trevor's side of the room was already set up with expensive equipment, designer clothes, and photographs from ski trips and beach vacations. Marcus's side looked bare with just his keyboard, some books, and a few changes of clothes. Trevor was polite but distant, the kind of politeness that came with good breeding but little genuine warmth. So you are the scholarship kid everyone is talking about, he said, not unkindly but matter-of-factly. Your audition story is like legend now. Whitmore never apologizes to anyone. Marcus unpacked his meager belongings, trying not to feel self-conscious. I just played my best. That is all. Must be nice, Trevor said, lounging on his expensive bedding, getting everything paid for. My parents are dropping $60,000 a year for me to be here. And I am not even that good. He said it without bitterness, just stating a fact about his privileged position in the world. The first week was an adjustment. Classes were rigorous and demanding. Music theory, ear training, piano technique, music history, ensemble performance, composition. Marcus found himself working twice as hard as most students just to keep up. While others had years of private lessons and music camps, Marcus was filling in gaps in his knowledge. He stayed up late in practice rooms, his fingers moving over keys until they ached. Some students were friendly and welcoming. A violinist named Sarah from California became a quick friend, sharing her notes and offering encouragement. A cellist named James from New York invited Marcus to join informal jam sessions where students experimented with different styles. But others kept their distance, viewing Marcus with suspicion or curiosity, like he was an experiment rather than a peer. The real challenge came during his first private lesson with Professor Chen. She was kind, but exacting, pointing out technical flaws that Mrs. Patterson had never caught. Your natural musicality is exceptional, she explained, but we need to strengthen your fundamental technique. You have developed some habits from teaching yourself that will limit you later if we do not correct them now. Marcus practiced until his hands cramped. He worked on scales and arpeggios, Hanon exercises and Czerny studies, all the boring technical work that built the foundation for artistry. Some nights he felt frustrated, wondering if he was losing the spontaneous creativity that made his music special. But Professor Chen assured him that discipline and inspiration were not enemies but partners. Principal Whitmore kept his distance at first, but Marcus would sometimes catch him watching during performances or master classes. The principal's expression was unreadable, neither hostile nor friendly. One day, about 6 weeks into the semester, Whitmore stopped Marcus in the hallway outside the main concert hall. "Mr. Johnson, a word, please." Marcus's heart skipped. He followed the principal into a small office lined with photographs of famous alumni and awards. Whitmore gestured for him to sit, then stood looking out the window for a long moment before speaking. "I owe you more than the apology I gave during your audition," he finally said, his back still turned. "I have been thinking about my behavior, about the assumptions I made. It forced me to examine prejudices I did not realize I carried." He turned to face Marcus. "I have dedicated my life to musical excellence, but I allowed superficial judgments to cloud my perception of where that excellence might come from." Marcus did not know what to say. He had not expected this conversation. Whitmore continued, "Your presence here has been valuable beyond your musical contributions. You have challenged our community to examine who we are and who we claim to be. Several faculty members have told me that students are having important conversations about access, privilege, and the purpose of institutions like ours." He paused. "I want you to know that I am implementing changes. We are expanding our scholarship programs, reaching out to community centers in underserved areas, and training our admissions team to focus purely on musical potential rather than pedigree." "That means a lot, sir," Marcus said carefully. "But I do not want to just be a symbol or a lesson. I want to be a musician." Whitmore nodded approvingly. "And you are. Your midterm composition received the highest marks in your class. Professor Chen tells me your technique is improving rapidly. You are earning your place here through merit, which is exactly as it should be." He sat down behind his desk. "I am telling you about these changes because I want you to understand the ripple effect of your courage. Every student who comes after you will benefit from the door you helped open." As Marcus left the office, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, certainly, but also the weight of representation. He had not come to Westbrook to be a pioneer or changemaker. He had come to learn music, to develop his craft. But he was beginning to understand that sometimes just existing in a space where you were not expected to be was itself an act of transformation. That weekend, Marcus called home as promised. His mother answered on the first ring, eager to hear every detail of his week. He told her about his classes, his new friends, the beautiful practice rooms with perfect acoustics. He mentioned his conversation with Principal Whitmore, and his mother was quiet for a moment. "Baby, you are doing something important there," she said softly. "Not just for yourself, but for every child who comes from where we come from and dreams of something bigger. You are showing them it is possible." "But Mama, I just want to play piano. I did not sign up to be a role model." She laughed gently. "Nobody signs up for it, honey. But when you work hard and succeed despite obstacles, you become one whether you want to or not. That is both a blessing and a burden." Her voice grew tender. "Just remember to be yourself. Do not let the pressure change who you are or why you make music." After hanging up, Marcus went to one of the smaller practice rooms and sat at a beautiful Steinway grand piano. He played Mama's Hands again, the composition that had started this whole journey. But as his fingers moved over the keys, he added new elements, new complexities that reflected everything he had learned in the past few weeks. The piece was evolving just like he was. Through the small window in the practice room door, he did not notice Principal Whitmore walking past and pausing to listen. The older man stood there for several minutes, his expression softening as he heard the music. When Marcus finished, Whitmore quietly walked away, but not before making a note in his phone to recommend Marcus for the Winter Showcase performance, the Academy's most prestigious student concert. Winter arrived at Westbrook Academy with an elegance that Marcus had never experienced. Snow fell in soft white curtains, transforming the campus into something from a storybook. Students hurried between buildings wrapped in expensive coats and scarves, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Marcus wore a second-hand winter jacket that Sarah had helped him find at a thrift store, but he no longer felt ashamed of his circumstances. He was learning that true wealth was measured differently than he once thought. The announcement of the Winter Showcase performers sent ripples through the student body. It was the most prestigious event of the fall semester, attended by influential figures in the music world, potential benefactors, and critics from major publications. Only 6 students were selected to perform, and the competition was fierce. When Marcus saw his name on the list, he stood frozen in front of the bulletin board, reading it over and over to make sure his eyes were not deceiving him. Trevor clapped him on the back. "Congratulations, man. You earned it." His initial distance had thawed over the months. He had come to respect Marcus's dedication and work ethic, even if their backgrounds remained worlds apart. "My parents are coming to the showcase. They will want to meet you." But not everyone was happy about Marcus's selection. A senior named Bradford Wellington, whose family had donated a wing to the academy, made his displeasure known. Bradford was technically skilled but emotionally flat in his performances, the kind of pianist who hit every note correctly but made you feel nothing. He had expected to perform at the showcase and took Marcus's selection as a personal insult. "Of course they picked the charity case," Bradford muttered loudly enough for Marcus to hear in the hallway. "Good optics for the academy. Shows how progressive they are." His friends laughed, and Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He wanted to confront Bradford, to defend himself, but Professor Chen's words echoed in his mind about letting his music speak louder than his words. The weeks leading up to the showcase were intense. Marcus spent hours perfecting his performance piece, a combination of his original composition, Mama's Hands, and a challenging Rachmaninoff prelude that showcased both his technical growth and emotional depth. Professor Chen worked with him relentlessly, pushing him to new levels of precision while ensuring he did not lose the raw authenticity that made his playing special. "Remember," she told him during their final rehearsal, "technique serves emotion, not the other way around. You have spent months building your technical foundation. Now trust it and let your heart lead." The night before the showcase, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his dorm bed, listening to Trevor's gentle snoring, thinking about how far he had come. Just months ago, he was delivering newspapers in the pre-dawn darkness and wiping down tables at a diner. Now he was preparing to perform on the same stage where legendary musicians had stood. The improbability of it all overwhelmed him. He got up quietly and made his way to the practice building. Using his student key, he let himself into his favorite practice room. The building was empty and dark except for the moonlight streaming through tall windows. He sat at the piano and began to play softly. Not his showcase pieces, but just improvising, letting his fingers wander where they wanted to go. The music that emerged was contemplative and hopeful, tinged with both gratitude and disbelief. He thought about his mother, probably asleep in their small apartment after another exhausting shift. He thought about Jasmine practicing her spelling words at the kitchen table. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, who had first shown him what was possible. All these people who had believed in him when he struggled to believe in himself. That is beautiful. Marcus jumped, his hands crashing discord on the keys. He turned to find Mrs. Elizabeth Hartley standing in the doorway. She was an elegant woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded him of his grandmother, who had passed away when he was young. She wore a long coat over what looked like evening attire. "Mrs. Hartley, I'm sorry I did not know anyone else was here." She smiled and walked into the room. "I could not sleep either. I often come to the academy at night when I miss my son. Music was his great love, and this place keeps him alive for me." She gestured to the piano bench. "May I sit?" Marcus moved over, suddenly nervous. This was the woman whose generosity had made everything possible. "I have wanted to thank you properly," he said. "The scholarship, the opportunity, it changed my life." Mrs. Hartley shook her head gently. "You changed your own life, Marcus. I simply removed an obstacle that should never have been there in the first place." She looked at the piano with sadness and love. "My son David would have been 25 this year. He had your passion, your dedication, but he never got to fully develop his gift." "I am sorry for your loss," Marcus said quietly. "He died in a car accident when he was 17, on his way home from a piano competition." She touched the keys lightly. "For a long time I could not bear to hear music. It reminded me too much of what I lost. But then Professor Chen played me your audition recording, and something shifted. Your composition about your mother's hands reminded me that music is about love, about finding beauty in struggle, about connection across different experiences." She turned to look at Marcus directly. "You play tomorrow not just for yourself, but for every person who has ever been told they do not belong somewhere. You play for my David, who never got his chance, and you play for your mother, whose sacrifice made this possible." Her voice grew stronger, Do not let nerves or doubt steal this moment. You have earned this stage. They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment before Mrs. Hartley stood to leave. Get some rest, Marcus. Tomorrow will be a day you remember for the rest of your life. The morning of the showcase arrived bright and cold. Marcus woke early and went through his routine carefully. He practiced his pieces one more time, but not obsessively. Professor Chen had warned him about over-practicing, about how it could make performances feel mechanical. He ate a good breakfast even though his stomach was in knots. He chose his concert attire carefully, the new black suit that Mrs. Hartley had insisted on providing for all scholarship recipients. His mother had taken the day off work, the first time she had done so in 3 years. She arrived with Jasmine in the early afternoon, both dressed in their Sunday best. When Marcus saw them in the academy lobby, he felt tears prick his eyes. His mother looked so small and out of place among the wealthy patrons in their designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Yet she carried herself with dignity. "My baby," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "Look at you in that suit. So handsome." Jasmine twirled in her dress. "I told everyone at school my brother is performing at a fancy music academy. They did not believe me until I showed them the program." Marcus spent time with them before the performance, showing them around the parts of campus they were allowed to see. Other students' families barely noticed them, but Marcus did not care. These were his people, his foundation. Their presence gave him strength. Backstage before the performance, Marcus could hear the audience filling the concert hall. The space seated 500 people, and tonight it would be packed. He peeked through the curtain and saw his mother and Jasmine seated in the middle section, looking around with wonder. He saw Mrs. Hartley in the front row with Professor Chen. He saw Principal Whitmore greeting important-looking guests. And yes, he saw Bradford Wellington's family in their prominent seats, Bradford himself standing nearby with a sour expression. The other performers gathered in the green room, each dealing with pre-performance anxiety in their own way. Sarah practiced breathing exercises. James paced back and forth, fingering invisible cello strings. Marcus found a quiet corner and closed his eyes, remembering why he made music in the first place. Not for applause or recognition, but because it was how he made sense of the world. The concert hall lights dimmed and conversations faded to expectant silence. Principal Whitmore walked onto the stage, his presence commanding attention. He welcomed the audience and spoke about Westbrook's proud tradition of musical excellence before introducing the first performer. Marcus watched from the wings as Sarah took the stage, her violin singing with crystalline clarity through a Mozart concerto. She was brilliant, and the audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Each performance showcased extraordinary talent. James brought the audience to tears with his emotional cello solo. A soprano named Claire hit impossibly high notes with seeming ease. Marcus felt his nerves building with each passing minute. He was scheduled to perform fifth just before the final act. The wait felt eternal. Finally, he heard his name. Our next performer is freshman Marcus Johnson, who will be playing an original composition titled Mama's Hands, followed by Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. Professor Chen caught his eye from the wings and gave him an encouraging nod. Marcus took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The stage lights were bright and warm. Beyond them, the audience was mostly darkness with occasional glints of jewelry and glasses. Marcus walked to the beautiful concert grand piano positioned at center stage. As he sat on the bench and adjusted his position, he looked out into the audience and found his mother's face. Even from a distance, he could see tears already glistening on her cheeks. She pressed her hand to her heart, and he knew what she was telling him. This moment was for both of them. Marcus placed his hands on the keys and the room fell completely silent. For a heartbeat, doubt tried to creep in. What if he froze? What if his fingers betrayed him? What if Bradford was right and he was just a charity case who did not really belong here? But then he felt the cool ivory beneath his fingers and remembered what music meant to him. It was home. It was truth. It was the language his soul spoke. He began to play. The opening notes of Mama's Hands floated through the concert hall, gentle and tender like a lullaby. Marcus had revised and expanded the composition since his audition, incorporating everything he had learned about structure and harmony, while keeping the emotional core intact. The melody moved through its familiar progressions, telling the story of sacrifice and love, of rough hands that created gentle moments, of poverty that could not diminish the wealth of family bonds. But Marcus had added new sections that reflected his journey. There was a passage that captured the anxiety of the audition, dissonant chords that resolved into hope. There was a movement that painted his first weeks at Westbrook, the struggle to fit in and keep up, represented by competing melodic lines that eventually found harmony. And there was a triumphant section that celebrated not just his success, but the success of everyone who had supported him. As he played, Marcus felt himself transported beyond the concert hall. He was not performing for the prestigious audience or the critics or even his proud mother. He was having a conversation with the piano, telling it secrets, asking it questions, listening to its responses. His fingers moved with confidence born from months of rigorous practice, but also with the spontaneous creativity that made his music uniquely his. The piece built to its emotional climax, all the themes coming together in a powerful statement about resilience and hope. Then it softened again, returning to the original lullaby melody but transformed by the journey, richer and more complex. Marcus played the final notes with such tenderness that he barely touched the keys, the sound dissolving into silence like morning mist. For a long moment after he finished, nobody moved. The silence stretched out, and Marcus wondered if he had made some terrible mistake. Then the applause began. It started as a ripple and built into a wave that crashed over the stage. People rose to their feet, and Marcus realized with shock that he was receiving a standing ovation. His mother was crying openly, Jasmine jumping up and down beside her. Mrs. Hartley had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Professor Chen was clapping with her hands raised high. Even Principal Whitmore was on his feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. But Marcus did not have time to process it all. He still had the Rachmaninoff to play. He took a breath, centered himself, and launched into the prelude. If Mama's Hands was his heart, this piece was his technical proof. The Rachmaninoff was demanding, full of thunderous chords and intricate passages that tested the limits of skill and stamina. Marcus attacked it with fierce determination, his hands flying across the keys, his body swaying with the music's dramatic intensity. This was different from his original composition. Here he was not just playing his own story, but channeling the passion of a Russian master, interpreting emotion that had been written over a century ago, but still resonated with human truth. Marcus brought his own voice to the interpretation, adding subtle dynamics and phrasing choices that made the familiar piece feel fresh and urgent. The final chord rang out, bold and definitive. Before it had even faded, the audience exploded into applause again. Marcus stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. As he walked off stage, his legs felt weak and his hands trembled with adrenaline. Professor Chen met him in the wings and pulled him into a tight hug. "That was extraordinary," she whispered. "You just announced yourself to the music world." The final performer played beautifully, but Marcus barely heard it. He was still processing what had just happened. After the concert ended and the audience began to mingle in the lobby, Marcus was surrounded by people wanting to congratulate him. Music critics asked for interviews. Wealthy patrons inquired about his future plans. Fellow students offered praise that seemed genuine rather than jealous. Bradford Wellington approached, and Marcus braced himself for a cutting remark. But Bradford extended his hand, his expression humble. "That was incredible," he said simply. "I was wrong about you. You belong here more than most of us." Marcus shook his hand, choosing grace over grudges. "Thank you. That means a lot." But the moment Marcus had been waiting for came when he finally reached his mother and Jasmine. His mother grabbed him and held on like she would never let go. "I am so proud of you," she sobbed into his shoulder. "That piece, hearing those people play your music about me, about us." She could not finish the sentence. Jasmine tugged at his sleeve. "Marcus, you were amazing. Can you teach me to play like that?" He knelt down to her level. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Jazz. Remember that." Mrs. Hartley approached them, and Marcus introduced his family. The wealthy philanthropist and the cleaning lady stood together, two women from different worlds connected by their love for the same young man. Mrs. Hartley took his mother's hands in hers. "Your son is a gift," she said warmly, "and clearly he gets his strength from you." His mother smiled through her tears. "He gets his music from somewhere deeper. I just tried not to get in its way." Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and his family had reluctantly left to catch their bus home, Marcus walked alone around the quiet campus. Snow was falling again, soft and silent. He found himself at the iron gates where he had stood months ago, terrified and hopeful. He thought about that scared boy with the worn keyboard case and cheap clothes and realized he was still that boy. The expensive education and fancy venue had not changed his core. He was still Marcus Johnson from the South Side, still the son of a cleaning lady, still the kid who learned piano at a community center. But now he also knew he could stand on any stage in the world and hold his own, not because he was better than anyone else, but because he had found his voice and learned to trust it. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Sleep well, baby. Your father would have been so proud too." She rarely mentioned his father, and the message brought fresh tears to Marcus's eyes. He looked up at the falling snow and whispered a thank you to the universe, to his mother, to Mrs. Patterson, to Professor Chen, to Mrs. Hartley, to everyone who had believed in him. Principal Whitmore's voice broke the silence. "Quite a performance tonight, Mr. Johnson." The older man walked up beside him, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I want you to know that I learned something valuable from you. Excellence is not about where you come from, but where you are willing to go. You taught me that." Marcus nodded, appreciating the words but also ready to move beyond them. "I just want to keep learning, keep growing as a musician." "And you will," Whitmore said. "I have already received 3 emails from prestigious summer programs wanting to offer you spots. Your future is very bright." He paused. "But remember, success is not just about personal achievement. It is about opening doors for others, about using your gifts to make the world more just and beautiful." As Marcus walked back to his dormitory, his feet crunching in fresh snow, he thought about the journey ahead. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, more obstacles to overcome. But tonight had proven something essential. He belonged. Not because someone granted him permission, but because he had claimed his place through talent, hard work, and unwavering belief in the power of music to transform lives. The piano had given him a voice when the world tried to silence him. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure that voice sang as loudly and as beautifully as possible, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been told they were not good enough, not worthy, not welcome. His story was just beginning, and the music would never stop.